Hello everyone, back tuning into this month's ECMWF, Meteo France and DWD seasonal model update. So this is going to take us through the next three tri-monthly periods. So we're going to begin with the period of January, February, March, so sort of late winter, really through to the beginning of the spring. And we're going to end actually at the spring of 2019 itself, March, April and May tri-monthly period. I know a few of you are waiting and wondering when the spring updates are starting at GWV. They will be in January. I'm not sure the exact day. Could be next Sunday, could be the following week, but certainly the spring updates will begin at GWV. It's very, very short. We always take December off from the longer range stuff, sort of calm down from the winter updates, which are very, very long and tiring and exhaustive. So James and I always need to have a little time off from the long range stuff. But we will be cranking it all back up again as we get through into January. Rest assured about that. And this sort of kicks it off, I suppose, given that we're going to see charts for the spring of 2020 in this update. So I'm going to get on that with you very shortly. Just say that coming up later on, or released earlier on today, I should say, is the week 10-day video update, including all the regular features. Next Sunday, GWV Sunday Roundup will be starting. So it's all going to begin cranking up again. All your favourite videos will be cranking up as we get through into the new year. Right then, so don't forget to check out the Week 10 video update on the homepage right now. Right then, let's begin with the mean sea level pressure anomaly for January, February, March 2020. So if these charts, of course, blue is extrapolating to low pressure and yellow, orange and red extrapolate to high pressure. So, for the mean sea level pressure anomaly from Meteo France for January, February, March, we have low pressure actually through the central part of the Atlantic. Hints of a little bit of high pressure up towards Scandinavia, Scandinavia as well. This is a bit of a change on what the Meteo France model has been forecasting over the past few months. This would imply a little bit of a southerly tracking type jet stream. There is no particular area of high pressure within the northern latitude, so we've got to say that there's very little northern block to be pushing this low pressure of a jet stream southwards. But that's a kind of chart that could at least involve a few colder snaps through the later winter period, as there's no particularly apparent area of high pressure through the Azores, and actually where you'd expect to see the Azores high, we've got low pressure. Moving on to the next tri-monthly period, this one takes us to February, March, April. Again, we still have this area of low pressure through the central part of the Atlantic, higher pressure generally to the east and the northeast as well. So with this, of course, we're at the very end of winter and into the spring here, which is always our most easterly month anyway. The spring is always the most easterly month that we have. So this probably bring in a continental type flow, an easterly type flow, which could drag in a lot of cloud and may even be a little bit on the cold side at times through the earlier part of the spring before it gets a little bit milder later on. The main thing though is that we're closer to higher pressure, so it does look as though things should be hopefully relatively drier there as we're going into the end of the winter and through to the spring. And then finally, the last tri-monthly period takes us through March, April and May. So this is the spring of 2020, of course, with low pressure weakening in the North Atlantic, high pressure sitting to the east of the country. It's a bit further south though this time, so that's probably more of a southerly, southeasterly type flow. It implies, I think, as we get later on into the spring, we could start bringing some warmer air up from the south, so potentially May could hint anyway at being rather warmer. Overall, that doesn't look too bad, an anomaly for the spring of 2020. You expect a reasonable amount of dry weather to be in with that, I would have thought, and probably relatively mild as well, especially later on. So these are our temperature anomalies for Europe from Meteo France for January, February and March too. So for the UK and for Ireland, actually, we're sort of just a little bit above average. So we're kind of like around half a degree above average. So not deviate too far from average for the UK. Most other parts of Europe do look warmer here. We're around half a degree to 1 degree above average in these orange shaded areas from Eastern Europe down to Spain and Portugal. The far north has no signal, so it could be a little bit colder actually across as far north of Scandinavia. Overall, I think it does hint at something a little bit cooler potentially for the latter part of the winter here. In the far northwest of Europe. The next tri-month period is February, March, April. Overall, again, rather above average through most parts of Europe. Not as warm an anomaly as we have seen with Meteo France over previous months, though. So the highest anomaly for most parts of Europe is really around half a degree to 1 degree above average. For the UK and for Ireland, we're around sort of average to half a degree above average there. And then finally we go through to March, April, May, spring 2020. Actually looks a little bit warmer then across particularly Northern Europe. Scandinavia, you'll see, has now gone to around half a degree to 1 degree above average, even into southeast of England, half a degree to 1 degree above average. So I think it does imply that later in the spring, as we get through particularly to May, we possibly see something a little bit cooler. But before then, particularly for the northwest, so Scandinavia, for the UK, it doesn't look overly mild, I have to say. Precipitation anomalies from January, February, March look like that. Very weak signals. You can see where the low pressure is, though, where it's wettest here through the central part of the Atlantic with all these green shadings. So quite a bit of low pressure through there. Does look a little bit drier to the north of Scandinavia, doesn't it? And possibly around the Norwegian Sea as well. Maybe just hinting a little bit of higher pressure up here, which of course, late winter, it's January, February, March, so late winter, that could still provide some colder conditions at times. So maybe later in the winter, have to watch out a little bit for heights to rise over Scandinavia. That could be the implication of what Meteo France is saying. Late winter, possibly Scandinavian high begins to come into play a little bit. Then we go through to the next tri-month period, which is February, March and April. This one, again, very weak signals for most parts of Europe, a little bit drier average through Central Med, a bit drier than average up towards North Scandinavia. Otherwise, in those white shadings, so again, no signal. Always, it seems to be precipitation has the weakest signals with these season models. And then finally, this is how precipitation is looking for March, April, May, the spring of 2020. Looks like that. So central parts of Europe hint at being a little bit drier, with some higher pressure through here. Otherwise, again, lots of white, lots of no signal. It does look drier down through the Med and into the southeast of Europe as well. So if we've got high pressure down here, which would be the implication of being rather dry, if there's plenty of high pressure down there, you would probably expect low pressure to be up here, actually. So that's a little bit strange. But as always with precipitation, the signals are really, really weak. I think the takeaway from Meteo France is possibly that we have to think a bit about a Scandinavian high later in the winter. Things go drier, but potentially a little bit colder later in winter across the north and the northwest of Europe. So that's Meteo France. This is how ECMWF is looking. This has been cell pressure anomalies from the ECM for, again, starting at January, February, March 2020. Now, this just is a continuation of what ECM has been showing throughout the past few months. The Atlantic onslaught goes on, really, even into the late winter period. All the low pressure is over and to the north and west of the country, with jet stream coming right through the country as well. I mean, it just looks very, very unsettled. Atlantic onslaught conditions continue through to the end of this winter with the ECM. That's February, March, April, still continuing the low pressure domination in the Atlantic and to our north as well. It's not quite as intense with the blue colours for this tri-monthly period, so the low pressure is perhaps weakening a bit. Nevertheless, it still looks like it's a very unsettled and Atlantic driven pattern. We finish up for the spring, March, April, May, with some higher pressure beginning to develop to our east and southeast. That's kind of in line with what Meteo France was showing, but of course Meteo France gets that higher pressure much more quickly compared to the ECM. Low pressure tend to be pushed out towards the northwest tends to be pushed out, with the jet stream probably towards Greenland and Iceland. So by the spring itself, March, April, May, possibly going something a little bit drier, a little bit warm. But before then, the ECM definitely wants to continue this low pressure Atlantic dominated stormy wet pattern. Temperature anomalies from the ECMWF for January, February, March looking milder than average, much more significantly so compared to what Meteo France was showing. So we've got these red colours here, particularly across central, northern and eastern parts of Europe. That's anomalies going 1 to 2 degrees above average. That's warmer than what Meteo France was showing. In the west, for the UK, for France, for Spain, Portugal, we're around 0.5 degree to 1 degree above average. So it's a little bit close to average in the west, but generally it's a mild, very mild end to the winter across nearly all parts of Europe. Temperature anomalies then as we go through to February, March, April, also looking significantly milder than averages. Is a warmer model update compared to what Meteo France was showing. ECM is warmer in all tri-monthly periods, really. By the time we get through to March, April, May, we see the temperature going a little bit closer towards average. Throughout it all, sort of Ireland, UK, around 0.5 degree to 1 degree above average. Most other parts of Europe are warmer than that, though. So it is a very mild sort of update from ECMWF this month. And also a lot wetter too. So you'll not be surprised, given that mean sea level pressure anomaly that we just saw. It is significantly wetter than average for the UK and Ireland, and for most parts of Scandinavia as well. It's a bit drier than average down towards the Med. So we've got higher pressure down across southern Europe, and lower pressure is to the north and west, but jet stream is also coming through like that. So just much more unsettled for late winter with the ECM compared to what Meteo France was just showing. Then we're into February, March, April, still hinting at being a bit wetter than average through northern, western parts of Europe as well, with further low pressure coming in off the Atlantic. Probably starting to turn a bit drier though, as the low pressure begins to weaken. And then finally we get through to March, April, May, spring 2020. Hints that we're losing the very wet conditions, but taking much longer to get there compared to Meteo France. Again, we see lots of white though, lots of no signal across most parts of Europe. And then finally we've got the DWD. So in agreement with the ECM really from the DWD. So that Meteo France run looks like it could be a little bit of an outlier actually. Certainly compared to these three models, putting the three together, because it looks like DWD is very much in line with what ECM was showing, low pressure within the northern latitudes, lots of low pressure sitting to our north, jet stream coming through like that as well. There's a bit of high pressure from the Azores in towards France and southwestern parts of Europe for late winter, but certainly nothing particularly cold in there. Then we're into February, March, April. Still the Atlantic domination goes on. Low pressure remains to our north, still continuing to bring the jet stream through like that in February, March, April. And then finally we get to March, April and May. Spring 2020 continues unsettled actually. Low pressure is more or less over top of the country. It's a trough of low pressure, not only unsettled but potentially a little bit cooler as well with that, as the jet stream would be digging southwards due to placement of that trough of low pressure. So the spring also with DWD looks very unsettled and potentially quite cool and wet, would you believe. Temperature anomalies with the DWD for January, February, March, close to average across the west of Europe, not particularly mild, maybe surprisingly so. Warmest anomalies are in the east and particularly in the northeast of Europe, Scandinavia through to west of Russia, up to 1 to 2 degrees above average. So the UK and Ireland actually just about the coolest places in Europe there for the late winter. Then we go through to February, March, April. Again, the far west of Europe looks close to average with the temperature anomaly just a little bit above. Warmest anomalies are through central, eastern and particularly northeastern parts of Europe. And then the final temperature anomaly for March, April, May looks like that. Again, close to or just a little bit above average across the west of Europe. This isn't as warm, I don't think, as what the ECM was just showing. Warmest anomalies continue to be in the far east and northeast of Europe. And lastly, precipitation. So for January, February, March, wetter than average over Scandinavia. Otherwise, there's lots of white going on there. That's no signal for precipitation for the latter part of the winter. Into February, March, April, again, Scandinavia continues to look quite wet. So above average precipitation there. Drier than average around the Black Sea and up towards the south of Russia. Otherwise, again, lots of no signal going on. And lastly, we have the precipitation anomaly for March, April, May. And look at that, it goes wetter than average here for the UK and Ireland during the spring of 2020. As that is sort of happening in March, April, May, as opposed to, let's say, February, March, April, that implies things probably get wetter as the spring progresses. Actually, I don't want to alarm anyone, but it probably gets wetter as the spring goes on. And May could be a very wet month, actually, on that sort of scenario. Let's hope not. Let's hope after so much wet weather through the autumn and into the early part of this winter, let's hope we have some drier and more pleasant weather for the spring. But we shall see. All will be revealed in the months ahead, of course. Remember, it's just a snapshot of what these models are showing. It's unreliable. Any forecast beyond 5 to 7 days is coming with big health warnings, large pinches of salt, particularly so when you're talking about tri-monthly periods. So just a snapshot of what they're showing. It could all look completely different next month. I wouldn't be too surprised if it does. But that's the upshot. So ECMWF just looks very mild from start to finish. Really also starting very unsettled through the latter part of winter, gets a little bit drier by the end of the spring. Meteo France is quite interesting. That is the one that does hold a little bit of colder potential, I think, for late winter. If we start seeing some higher pressure building up over Scandinavia, otherwise that one also goes towards drier and milder weather for the spring. And then DWD does it the other way round. Actually, it turns things a bit drier, but stays relatively Atlantic-driven through the early period, so through late winter. But by the time we get through to the spring, DWD is turning things very wet indeed, I think. For the spring of 2020, let's hope not. Right, so that's it. We'll do it all over again next month, of course. So you'll get to see what these models are showing next month. And as I say, next month we're going to begin the spring updates, both in terms of analogues and also the first seasonal model roundup for the spring of 2020 will be released towards the last weekend of January. Don't forget to check out week's 10-day video update, currently on the homepage at GWV.com. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.